So I'm making this video in order to clarify a position I took on Reddit regarding an unpopular position I had on Dragon Age. Basically, the position I'm taking is that although it seems like a paradox, I believe that Bioware's decision to make both Zevran and Liliana killable in Dragon Age Origins was one of the utmost reasons gamers became more accepting of including homosexuality in the RPG space. And because I believe this to be true, I also believe that if Bioware understood this fact and changed their design philosophy while writing and incorporating the character of Tosh in Veilguard, I suggest that it would have ushered a noticeable and similar change in how gamers accept trans characters in the RPG space over the next 5 years. I want to start by listing some assumptions I am making. If you disagree with these assumptions, that's fine, but that's probably why we're going to disagree. I'm not a researcher and I don't have access to player data, so most of my assumptions are just based on being a boomer and living through the releases of games for the last 20 years. A lot of this comes to anecdotal observations of changes in how homosexuality and gay options are seen amongst gamers over the past couple decades. So the primary assumption I am making is that following the release of Dragon Age Origins in the late 2000s, between around 2010 and 2018, gamers became noticeably more tolerant of including gay people within the RPG space and providing options that cater to gay gamers. I would say that this change correlated to a change amongst the general public in the US in regards to gay marriage that was occurring at the same time. However, from my perspective, gamers seemed to be on the cutting edge of that change and also a bit more progressive than the general public. I'm not making the claim that characters like Zevran and Liliana were the sole reason for this change, but I do think that these characters and the characters that they inspired in the early 2010s were a significant reason the change happened amongst the Western RPG gamers. A secondary assumption I am making is solely for the sake of the argument. I don't believe Bioware's primary goal in making their games is to propagandize gamers into being more accepting of homosexuality, but the purpose of this essay is to show how logically this gameplay decision led to a change in gaming culture and how this could be reproduced in the future with other groups, in this specific case the trans community. So even though I personally don't believe these decisions were made with this goal in mind, I'm going to pretend that they were in order to illustrate the analysis. So assumptions out of the way, I'll get into my actual argument. The reason I believe making gay characters killable in Dragon Age Origins led to greater acceptance of homosexuality fall into two categories. First, it allowed gamers of all comfort levels to experience homosexual themes and storylines at their own pace. And second, it provided a gameplay incentive for a gamer to want to engage with these characters that positioned the player into subconsciously choosing to, quote, opt in. I'll start with the comfort levels. I want to start by defining and categorizing RPG gamers into three categories. Category A we will call the allies. These are the subset of gamers that already agree with including homosexual characters in gaming. For the sake of this conversation, this group is practically irrelevant. Whatever the game does to make these people become more tolerant of the portrayal of homosexuality in gaming is not influencing the direction of the culture either way. They already agree with us. Category B we will call the neutrals. These are the subset of gamers who are convincible one way or the other. It could be that they don't have strong opinions, or maybe they have a negative opinion initially, but they are able to be convinced. If the goal is to change gaming culture to be more tolerant of homosexual representation in gaming, these are the most important people to accommodate and ensure that they stay comfortable in the space. Finally, category C we will call the haters. These are the subset of gamers that have such a strong bias, they are either impossible to convince or they aren't worth the time and effort to convince. If you look at things in terms of game theory, if the goal is to shift the gaming culture, the most important thing to do is keep the neutrals from getting triggered, followed by keeping the haters from getting triggered, and finally keeping the allies from getting triggered and losing support. Building the game in a way that gives the players the agency to be homophobic and kill off the gay characters if they feel like it allows the neutrals to engage with gay content in a way that is appropriate to their comfort level. Because one of the key appeals of Western RPGs is their replayability, they naturally will become more and more comfortable with the content over multiple playthroughs. If the gay content is done well, they will naturally become more and more comfortable including more and more of it into their playthroughs. Because Zevran, Liliana, and Marjolaine were so fun and well written, along with like gay-coded minor comic relief characters like Haran and Wade, this is what caused more and more of the subset of RPG gamers to become more tolerant of homosexuality being present in future RPGs throughout the early 2010s. And if a character was written poorly, the neutrals aren't, quote, forced to deal with them throughout a 40-hour playthrough, so it becomes less and less relevant and important to them to resist homosexual characters in future games. Allowing the gay characters to be killed off also allows the haters to create a game experience to their taste, which keeps them from getting triggered about being propagandized or whatever, and having like this energy to create a ton of articles, tweets, reviews, videos decrying the gay agenda and trademarks. The danger is that if you overly trigger the haters, they can negatively influence and trigger the neutrals. And while it may feel a little gross to us, this allows the game to be kind of spun in a way by the haters, where they get to have a laugh being homophobic in-game. This further de-incentivizes them from getting triggered, as they can have a fun experience as well with the game. So they're not making all those articles, tweets, videos. Finally, even though the allies are the least important group when it comes to the game theory of this, they still get the content they like because they could just choose not to kill off the gay characters and enjoy their content and story. I don't want to get too personal, but I kind of want to give a little background of who I am, so you have an idea of where I'm coming from, and I think I kind of serve as a pretty good example to this particular point in particular. As I said, I'm an old man now, but back in my day, I played Dragon Age Origins when I was still a kid living with my parents. I'm a gay man, but as a lot of gay man experience growing up, at the time I was very closeted, and because I didn't want to cause rifts with my family members I was living with, and I sometimes expressed more homophobic ideas to blend in. So my first couple times playing through Dragon Age Origins as a teen, I killed off Zevran early on in the storyline because I had a fear he would like flirt with my main character or do something or say something that came across as gay, and it would be overheard by family members and kind of force a conversation I was not comfortable with having at that time, where I'd need to explain what the game was and how it had that option. Because of this, I have a certain level of sympathy for even straight gamers who are younger and still a little insecure about their sexuality, being put into these situations where they're forced to explain how games work to normies who don't understand video games or how RPGs work. Allowing players to engage with the part of the story and worlds that they're comfortable with to start allows them a safe space to engage and gives them the opportunity to introduce these homosexual characters, themes, and storylines at a slower pace, leading them to become more tolerating over time. As an example, as a kid, I might have killed off Zevran for homophobic reasons, but I still was playing a male character, so I wasn't really worried about Liliana lezzing out over my character. So throughout my early playthroughs, I still got a chance to see a good and enjoyable lesbian character and an arc that you get in Origins that helped open my mind in a way I was comfortable with at the time, that hey, maybe this isn't that bad and I don't have to be uncomfortable including another small thing next time. For replayable RPGs like this, it cascades over time, allowing less comfortable players to naturally move into a direction of tolerance. Next, I want to talk about how gameplay subtly incentivizes gamers to opt in and manipulates them into becoming more tolerant. If you give the player agency to kill off characters, you create a situation where the player has less access to resources or content via gameplay. Do you want your character to have one of the best bows in the games, Marjolaine's recurve? You're going to have to engage with Liliana's character quest. There are other good bows in the game you can use, but Marjolaine's recurve is unique and is another option that opens like a variety in playstyles. It's important that the player isn't soft-locked and they are given other tools to help them accomplish the challenge of the game, so they have a good experience if they choose they don't want to engage with gay content. Otherwise, you risk jeopardizing the player's comfort level from the first point. And it's actively helpful to legitimately give the player a choice because you position the player to actively opt in. And that opt-in mentality subconsciously manipulates the player because they are choosing to accept it. Therefore, the fun they are getting from making that choice makes like some kind of neurological connection between the choice and the dopamine hit. When a player isn't feeling defensive about being railroaded into liking or accepting a character they have a bias against, other variables and gameplay elements become competitive and allow easier compromises to be made. For example, let's take a gamer that is part of the haters group. He is replaying Dragon Age Origins and is contemplating the main party he wants to play the game through with. He is homophobic and both the rogues in the game are gay characters, so he normally wouldn't bring them along, and usually either doesn't recruit them or kills off Zevran and Liliana. It's important that he was initially given a pathway to have a good experience with the type of world he is comfortable with and likes, as he can always choose to have the Warden be a rogue. Or you could argue rogues aren't so important that it's simple enough to get through the game without one. But this time he has a really fun idea about how he wants to build and roleplay a mage, and because he doesn't have this defensive relationship with the game and the homosexual characters, even though he's homophobic, he weighs the pros and cons in his mind and figures that for this playthrough, the benefit of being able to play the build he wants will overcome the negatives of having to play with the gay character, in his mind. See how this mentality puts the onus on the player making the choice as an opt-in. Maybe he normally plays an archer, so this time he decides to bring Zevran along to see what a dual-wield coup de grace backstabbing rogue will be like in gameplay. Because he opted in on this choice, his brain will in turn associate the dopamine hit he is getting from this coup de grace backstabbing rogue gameplay with the choice itself. I think this truth is critical in understanding why so many RPG gamers became so open to homosexual representation in games after Dragon Age Origins, because even though they may have initially had a harder time with the idea of it, this like opt-in mentality like associated these gameplay dopamine hits with this choice of using them. Now let's contrast this with Tosh, a character that is forced onto the player. Instead of having that opt-in mentality, every time this person from this haters subgroup has to interact with parts of the story they dislike, their brain chemistry is associating with annoyance. And every time this player is getting a dopamine hit from a fun gameplay option that opens up from using Tosh in the party, it's not being associated with the choice that the player is making, causing the association and mental conditioning to go to waste. In conclusion, while I feel like as fans we all tend to agree that Veilguard had a lot of variables like writing, certain financial constraints, team cohesion, hiring decisions, scope, etc., I see a lot of people missing this key aspect of why Dragon Age Origins was so successful at changing gaming culture in regards to the acceptance of homosexuality. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this essay.